Right, good morning, everybody. We're going to wait just a little bit longer as we see the number of participants increasing by the second. But let me start talking and introduce myself. My name is Nigel Crisp. I'm the privilege to be the chair for today's important session. I'm an independent member of the House of Lords and was previously, some long time ago, Chief Executive of the NHS and also head of the Department of Health here in England. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you all here. We've got a good turnout. I can see we've already got 70 people joining us, which is absolutely terrific. So let me just take you through what we're intending to do today. So I think we've got a slide on housekeeping, which I'll just get put up. So the most important point is the session is being recorded and will be shared online in due course. So bear that in mind when you're speaking. You can see the hashtags there. I think they were also sent to you with your introduction. And another important point here is that if you want to share comments or ask questions, please use the chat function and they will be fed through to me in due course in terms of the questions and so on, but use that function. And my experience of these things is actually the chat is often really very interesting. So do put whatever you want within the chat and let's get some discussion going there as well as in the main session. So to ask the panelists a live question, use the chat and I'll admit you to the conversation. And could I ask panelists to mute their microphones when not in use? And remember to unmute later on, though I'll remind you if necessary. So I think those are the main points that we need to be looking at there. Let's then turn to the next slide, please. Here's the agenda. I think you all got the agenda, didn't you, with your joining instructions. But what I can tell you is we've got an absolutely terrific range of people talking to us. In fact, so many really senior people, as you can see here, senior politicians and people from within the whole housing sector. I think we've got a wonderful group of people here to talk to us. It means we're quite congested for time, but I hope that we will be able to get through some questions. So the key questions that we'll be looking at today are what more can Greater Manchester, Liverpool City region and the Northwest region generally do to lead the way on a healthy homes revolution? Is the government doing enough? How could the APPG's white paper and the principles set out in the Healthy Homes Act end the delivery of substandard and poor quality homes in the Northwest? What are the barriers and so on? We'll get to those questions as we move through the agenda. So let me just make a couple of comments, finally, just myself, before setting off the meeting fully. I haven't got much time to give background, but let me just say, this is an idea whose time has come. Why are we building some of the worst houses in Europe? Why are we building houses which too often, or homes which too often are damaging of people's health and well-being, rather than ones that enhance their life and enhance their health and well-being? And the big question for today, of course, is can the Northwest lead the way? And as Jill Morris said to me at the beginning of this, we're probably going to end up during the course of today in violent agreement that we all think this is the right way forward. So what today is really about, what this hour and a half is really about, is what are we going to do? Government has to act, of course, but local government can act too. So what actions can we take? What actions can we take in the Northwest? So on that note, it's my great pleasure to turn to Ashley Bertie, who's head of campaigns for 38 Degrees, who's been doing some work on identifying whether the local public in the Northwest want there to be a healthy homes revolution. Ashley, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lord Crisp, and good morning, all. So I said, I'm Ashley Bertie. I'm head of campaigns at 38 Degrees. 38 Degrees, we are an online campaign organisation made up of over 2 million members across the UK, and our interest is into deepening democracy right across the UK and helping build people power. So demonstrating that people care about issues that pertain to their lives and their health and well-being in the areas where they live. The Healthy Homes Bill that the Town and Country Planning Association have put forth really does try to engender a better way in which people can think about building homes in the 21st century. And it's been our pleasure to work with them and other key stakeholders in trying to drive home the message that people in the Northwest really care about this. Our role in this campaign has been specifically looking at the Liverpool City region and trying to galvanise local people around the issue, show awareness around this, and also try to help them lobby their politicians, their MPs, councillors, as well as the City region council around these matters. So what have we done to this point to do that? So in January of this year, we really started to push the agenda on this. We put forth a petition that we sent out to every single person within our membership in the Liverpool City region. So that's roughly 92,000 people, as well as trying to push that more wider to as many people as possible can across the region. We found that over 3,000 people signed our petition, which isn't bad going just after Christmas, saying that they want to have the health and home principles that the Town Country Planning Association put forth embedded within housing planning moving forward. For those who don't know, the 11 principles touch on matters such as ensuring new developments have appropriate fire safety regulations, access to local amenities, that there are sustainable green spaces around housing developments, things that aren't always happening at this moment in time. Matter of fact, the Rainsford review of 2020 found that there are too many houses being built in poor areas, and also that poor quality housing is prevalent right across the UK. Using that petition, which we were able to work with local politicians, councillors, MPs, as well as the Town Country Planning Association, we then put forth a survey to those petition signatures, trying to see what their thoughts were around what we could do to engender better housing across the Liverpool City region. We found that nearly 70% would not describe their house as excellent. None of the respondents described the quality of housing in the Liverpool City region as excellent, and 61.2% stated that they would look more favourably upon politicians in the area who put forth a concerted effort to improve housing in the region. So clear energy and support for the principles, and also a clear mandate to think more creatively and innovatively about what planning developments could look like, not only in the region, but across the country. And one of the reasons why we wanted to support this campaign is because the Northwest and the Liverpool City region in particular have a proud history of looking differently and being more creative in how we think about housing in this country. And there's certainly evidence to suggest that what happens in the Northwest can be a template for more progressive housing across the country. Using that evidence, using that energy and the influence of our members in the Liverpool City region, we then submitted a document to the Liverpool City region saying that there is clear support for these principles, and it is our hope that the City region not only look favourably upon our consultation submission, but really do think about what the people want. As I mentioned at the start of my remarks, we are an organisation which are people-powered. We don't campaign on issues unless the public tell us that's what they want to see happen. And for us, it's been clear that talking to different people across the Liverpool City region, talking to people right across the Northwest, that there is clear momentum for the Healthy Homes Bill, and we are more than happy to continue our support to ensure we get it over the line. And my hope is that if the Northwest can get this over the line, that it will act as a template and a catalyst for more progressive housing right across the UK.
Thank you very much indeed, Ashley, and thank you for keeping to time as well. Two quick things I noted there. One was that 61.2% of voters support the ideas here, which was obviously a message to the parliamentarians everywhere, wasn't it? And indeed the mayors. But also that important point, what happens in the Northwest may happen elsewhere, and that's what's happened before on housing. So it's on that note, we're going to turn to the next point where we've got four people talking about the important question of how the Northwest can lead the way towards healthy housing. And we're going to be joined by two people who are in the business of development and building or housing, and by two of our MPs, two of the region's MPs as well. So let me go first to Charlie Norman, who's Chief Executive of Mosscare St. Vincent's. Charlie, over to you.
Thank you, Lord Crisp, and hopefully you can hear me. And thank you so much for the invite to speak today. I feel very, very strongly and passionately about this topic. And as you and I discussed at the beginning of this conversation, health fundamentally should start at home, and health begins at home and shouldn't be in clinical settings and within hospital settings. So I think it's absolutely the time for a revolution on this. So I'm MSV's Chief Exec, part of Greater Manchester and GM housing providers, and we provide homes for 1 in 5 people across Greater Manchester, and we employ 28,000 people. So it's fantastic to see this, and I think, you know, housing and a good place to live should be front and central of health creation. And it's absolutely the right thing to do. So, and we're trying within Greater Manchester, using devolution, working with partnerships and building massive relationships over the last few years with the 10 districts, the Health and Social Care Partnership and the Combined Authority, to do things at scale and do things differently. And we're talking about doing things differently in the Northwest, which I absolutely agree with. And we know that a poor home and a poor place to live can be so detrimental to kids and their schooling and to people's mental health and physical health outcomes. So as health creators, I think we've got a duty to provide really, really good housing. I'm a social housing provider. I work with social housing. And I think we've got to build a movement now that we've got to protect that social housing. We've got to build more of it. We've pledged together to build 50,000 new truly affordable homes, which I'm sure Paul will speak to. And to challenge those issues around health within our communities, about ageing well and staying well at home as people age, around retrofitting our properties and creating decent, safe and warm homes for people to live with lower bills, around specialist and supported accommodation for people with learning disabilities, that kind of thing, and having better longer term commissioning for support for people. We work together on homelessness, rough sleeping and temporary accommodation. It's quite shocking that today we've got so many people, so many families living in temporary accommodation, and we really want to see no return to rough sleeping. And, you know, the home has been brought into sharp relief, hasn't it, with what's happened with the pandemic, and we need to do so much more to make sure that people feel comfortable in their homes and in their communities. So I think it's all about working together at scale and building those relationships and doing those big strategies, working on those big strategies together. So I do think we can lead the way. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you very much indeed, Charlie. And can I just say, please would people call me Nigel? The title is useful to get in the room, but once I'm in the room, please call me Nigel. I'm going to call you all by your first names if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. So great pleasure now to turn to James Stevens, who's Director for Cities for the Home Builders Federation. So James, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I think it's become very apparent during the pandemic that the health and well-being of our people is going to be critical as we go forward. And the public, after its sacrifices during the pandemic, really will expect better from its housing stock. And there are some very important principles in the TCPA's Healthy Homes draft bill that the HBF, the Home Builders Federation, that is, would strongly support. But I would also like to put in a plea for volume. I know this might be unpopular amongst perhaps the other participants on this panel, but one of the reasons why the pandemic has been so difficult in some places is a consequence of people living in overcrowded conditions. In preparation for this meeting, I was doing some research, and according to the King's Fund, the Health Foundation and the New Policy Institute, they've all shown that overcrowded households have an increased risk of both the transmission and the worst outcomes of COVID-19. And the top 5 most crowded areas in the country have seen a 70% or more increase in coronavirus cases compared to the least crowded. You know, it's quite apparent that the pandemic has highlighted the health implications of housing, and poor housing conditions such as overcrowding and high density are associated with the greater spread of COVID-19, and people have had to spend more time in their homes that are overcrowded, damp and unsafe, thereby driving that up. So we know about the economic fallout from the pandemic, but it's also very clear that there are major social problems arising from the pandemic associated with people's housing supply. And I would put to you that one of the problems related to that has been our systemic failure in this country to build enough housing of the right type for people, and the paucity of new housing supply compared to need, and the debilitating social consequences of this, that is poor affordability and overcrowding, isn't new news. We've had the housing crisis for at least 2 decades. It's a 2-decade-long housing crisis. And this was something that was recognised by the Labour government back in 2004 when it commissioned the Barker Review on housing supply. And one of those consequences of that failure to increase our stock of housing has been these deaths amongst lower income households occupying overcrowded housing stock. So what can we do about this? Well, I think the mayors of both the Liverpool City region and Greater Manchester are uniquely placed. They have devolved powers in relation to housing and planning. And there are 2 things we really need. One is to ensure that we plan for enough housing in the first place, and the ability of the mayors to prepare spatial strategic plans would enable us to address that in some way. But they also have powers in relation to those spatial plan making powers to think about the type, tenure, layout and performance of those new homes, and how we integrate these new homes and these new communities with services, amenities, access to green space, public and private gardens, and access to public transport systems, and encouraging active travel. So that's the plea that I would like to put in to this forum, is that the mayors do have powers at their hands to integrate, to implement the TCPA's Healthy Homes principles, and we would urge the mayors to continue to make progress in the preparation of those plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, James, and making very powerful points about quantity as well as quality, and the 2 actually needing to go hand in hand in the question of volume. I don't know if people will disagree with that, but before we get to the mayors, let us then turn to MPs, and first of all to Andrew Gwynne, MP, who's the chair of the Greater Manchester All-Party Parliamentary Group. Andrew, over to you, please.
Thank you, thank you, Nigel. And firstly, my apologies. I am going to have to go at 10:30 with my dad for his chemotherapy at the Christie. But Greater Manchester APPG will still be represented by my brilliant friend, Barbara Keeley, who I believe is giving a contribution later on. I always want to start these conversations with a quote that Andy Byrne, when he was my boss in the Shadow Health team, was always keen at pushing, and that was reminding us that Nye Bevan, that great radical that helped form the National Health Service after the Second World War, was not just the Minister for Health, he was the Minister for Health and Housing. And somewhere along the line, health and housing has been disentangled. And actually, I think we've got a duty to place the 2 together, because the 2 are so linked. We have really to understand that. I want to really follow on from where James left off, because we've kind of lost that vision of housing. In the 1930s, we looked to building large garden cities that had a vision of quality housing, suburbia for the masses, not just for those that could afford to live in semi-detached houses with lovely front and back gardens, lots of open space. It was well planned. But after the Second World War, when perhaps the housing need was greatest, we basically went for quantity over quality, and we broke the link between building quality housing at scale. We just built housing at scale. And so we ended up with a whole load of planning mistakes, many of which have since been demolished. But also we ended up destroying communities. So it was right that we wanted to remove the slums from the inner cities, but we basically lifted whole communities and split them up. Families would be dispersed across a whole city region and placed in the middle of nowhere in new overspill estates, and I've got one of those former Manchester overspill estates in my constituency, Horton Green. In the neighbouring constituency, we've got Hattersley, and speaking to the first generation of people who moved to those overspill estates, they'll tell you there was no public transport, there were no shops, there were no doctors' surgeries. They had to walk 6, 7, 10 miles to go to work where they used to live, because that's where the factories and the workplaces still were. The housing had been shifted out of the city. And we created donuts around our city centres as well. And it's taken many decades to start infilling where the slum clearances took place 50 years or more ago. So that's why spatial planning is so crucial. And I know Paul probably feels that he's got his fingers burnt from the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework process. That has been torturous, and hopefully we can get the Plan of 9 over the line for Greater Manchester. But the point is, we need to have public buy-in in spatial planning. We need to be building the right homes in the right places, and we need people to think these are homes for me. And I, hope we can get this right, because it is, as James said, about that sense of place. It's about building safe, secure communities. It's about having clean air. It's about having green, open spaces. It's about having access to jobs, to public transport to get to jobs if those jobs are outside of the area, good education, and good community facilities. It's about building communities, not just building homes. That is so important. Those homes have to be lifetime homes as well. They have to be suitable for an aging population. Can the Northwest lead the way? Yes, because we are the innovators, we're the thinkers, we're the doers, and I have every confidence we can get this right.
Great, what a great note to end on, and a great note to turn, it seems to me, to the two mayors who are on the call, and who've already been mentioned as people who can actually do something in this context, and it's not just about lobbying government nationally. So let me turn first of all to Paul Dennett, who is Salford City Mayor and also the Greater Manchester portfolio holder for housing. Paul, please.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Delighted to be here today talking about the relationship between housing and health. And as Andrew's already highlighted, this is not a new relationship, and this is arguably something we thought better about in the not too distant past. And in a sense, we're going full circle and revisiting that past in terms of what we're doing today. But for me, the planning system is obviously at the heart of some of what we've been talking about today. But I think it's important to acknowledge the restrictions on the planning system, in that the planning system primarily deals with new homes that are being brought into our communities, into our cities, into our towns. Also, the Healthy Homes Bill by the TCPA, I support all of those principles in many respects, but when you juxtapose that with the planning white paper we've recently seen from government, they seem miles apart. Government's arguing for more centralisation, more supremacy of the national planning policy framework, and arguably more deregulation. So there is clearly a tension between what we're trying to create within city regions, within local authorities through our local plan process, and what's actually happening in terms of national policy and empowerment through the national planning policy framework. Much of what we're talking about today, we've been thinking about here in Greater Manchester for a number of years now. And anyone who's familiar with the spatial framework process and the policy content of that document will be familiar with our real passion for what we're talking about today. Strategic planning for me is about placemaking. And what we mean by that are building sustainable, resilient communities, new properties that are energy efficient, speaking to that whole agenda around fuel poverty, and also importantly, low and zero carbon homes. As you know, within Greater Manchester, we have an ambition to be net zero carbon homes from 2028. Now, government at the moment, are not necessarily working to the same sort of timescales as we are here in Greater Manchester. They've got a carbon neutrality target of 2050. We're working to a 2038 target here in Greater Manchester. So again, you know, we really need to align the national with the local if we're going to deliver on some of this. For us, you know, walkable, safe, green neighbourhoods sits at the heart of our approach to strategic planning. So this really speaks to this whole notion of infrastructure-led development, placing public transport nodes at the heart of where we allocate sites for development in the future. Importantly, and Andrew's referenced this already, you know, services and facilities locally and walking and cycling as the default. You know, we've been on a kind of walking and cycling revolution here in Greater Manchester over recent years under Mayor Byrne, and it's been great to see more people enjoying walking and cycling, certainly during the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's also about creating places, isn't it? This isn't just a numbers game. This isn't about national government meeting its, you know, target of 300,000 homes mid-2020. This is about, you know, trees, it's about seating, it's about parks, greenery, encouraging social interactions and communities to interact with each other, protecting really valuable places. And I specifically think about some of those valuable places within the urban environment, which is a really important issue. You know we've got issues with the heat island effect. We also know that life expectancy between people who live in the greener and more rural parts of our conurbations tend to live, you know, in my city, 10 years longer than people who live in the urban environment. And spatial planning needs to speak to that. There is an inequity argument here in terms of what we do on this agenda. But it is also about the quality of new homes and also about contributions to infrastructure. Just to highlight, in terms of the GMSF, you'll know that the vast majority of new homes in Greater Manchester is to be built on brownfield and urban land. 88% was what we were proposing. The priority was given to sites within 800 metres of public transport facilities. So that was the methodology we used for site allocation. We also sought to protect green infrastructure, especially, as I've said, in the poorest areas of our city region, because we are aware of those issues around the heat island effect and life expectancy. All development net zero carbon by 2028, and all homes built to the nationally described space standards and to be adaptable and accessible, meeting, I think it's part M42 of the building regulations. But I think for me, beyond this, there are some really, really tricky issues if we're serious about delivering on this agenda. And for me, I'm not a big fan of just political rhetoric for the sake of it. And what I'm getting at here is the ongoing viability challenges we face in post-industrial parts of the country, the NPPF supremacy when it comes to these sorts of matters, government's infatuation with land value uplift when it's talking about the allocation of public capital, the Green Book and public capital allocation, you know, the 80-20% split between, you know, northern parts of the country and southern parts of the country, where we have overheating housing markets sucking up public capital. And if we're serious about levelling up, and if we're serious about this agenda, we need to get serious about Green Book reforms in terms of what the Treasury has recently muted. Affordable homes programme at the moment, net zero carbon doesn't seem to be part of the thinking around grant rates. And if we're serious about delivering net zero carbon homes, Homes England and the ministry need to get serious about making sure those grant rates allow our housing associations and councils to deliver the homes that we want for the future. We know standards in our private rented sector has been an issue for some time. Greater Manchester's coming forward with a good landlord charter in the very near future to hopefully start to address some of these issues, using the soft powers, if you like, of Mayor Burnham's office, and also using our regulatory services. But also at the heart of some of this is, you know, resourcing local authorities. It's been awful in local government over the last 10 years. My local authority has seen 222 million taken out of its revenue budget since 2010 and 11. That's cuts to the revenue support grant and unfunded budget pressures. Regulatory services have been decimated as a consequence of this. So if we're serious about standards in the private rented sector, we need to get serious about enforcement and properly resourcing local government. Affordability for me has to also be at the heart of this. I mean, during this COVID-19 pandemic, you may be aware The Guardian reported on this, but we've had 70,000 households evicted from their homes during a pandemic when we're trying to keep people in their homes and not interacting with each other, obviously to end this virus, which has caused untold damage to this country. In Greater Manchester, we have around 79,000 households on our housing waiting list. Over 95,000 homes have been purchased under right to buy since 1980. Many of those homes have never been replaced, and we know from national data 40% of those homes find their way into the private rented sector. But I think importantly, one of the first things we saw back in 2010 was a scrapping of things like housing market renewal, New Deal for communities, single regeneration budgets. Again, if we are serious about some of this, we need to get back to those days where money was made available for us to work in partnership and collaboration to deliver on this agenda. Also, the construction industry is changing, modular homes, modern methods of construction, green homes, net zero. What are we doing in that works and skills space to genuinely train up those future people in that workforce to deliver the homes that we need? There is a huge challenge there, and we must be responding to that. Government have been working with us recently through the Brownfield Housing Fund monies, but we need much, much more of this. James talks about this being a numbers game and obviously wanting us to increase supply. I understand what James is saying and why he's saying that. But what I would say is government's latest tinkering of the local housing need methodology to foist on all the big cities up and down the country 35% increases in their LHN targets is not necessarily delivering what James probably wants to see. So again, we need to lobby and campaign in that space to see reform. So yes, we can have great plans and strategies, but we also need to deal with the practical reality of some of the challenges that face all of us in cities and city regions up and down the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul, for what was partly a reality check about the trickiness and partly actually a really interesting exposition of the link, what you can do locally and what you've got to do nationally, and how the two relate, isn't it? And that's, I understand how you as mayors are in that space very much. So it's my great pleasure to now move to Merseyside and to welcome Steve Rotheram, who's the Metro Mayor of Liverpool City Region. And Steve, over to you, please.
Thanks, Chair. And before you put the clock on, just to pick up where Andrew left off, my great friend is a guy that you'll have heard of called John Bishop. And he used to say about new towns, because he lived in Runcorn and I lived in Kirby Newtown, as it was called at the time. We were promised this new utopia. And he used to say that planners at that stage believed that all you needed was a chippy and a pub and building a housing estate around it. And it's exactly what Andrew's just been saying there, forget about doctors and schools and nurseries and, or how you get to and from work. As long as you can have a pub and a chippy, you were all right. And hopefully we will learn from those mistakes of the past, because the bit that I've been asked to speak about is obviously what's happening in the Liverpool City region in our area. And I couldn't agree more with the statements, that was made about now is the time for the healthy homes revolution. We're hearing this word revolution an awful lot, a green industrial revolution and lots of other skills revolution. But I do think that it's time for this. And it was, I think an important point that was made earlier, and let's not lose that, about the healthy homes issue, and whether we can use this point to really start to address some of the problems that we've had over the last decade or two. For instance, about ending the scourge of fuel poverty, which is a big one for me. I also think that we need to be looking to better prepare for an aging society. And I don't know whether anyone's picked up that, but conditions like dementia will become more prevalent. And so we need to now be thinking about the types of homes that we build so that we don't have to continually retrofit at a later date. We need to stop the contribution of those unhealthy homes that we've just been discussing to contribute to unhealthy problems, health issues such as underlying health conditions caused by living in poor homes can have a direct effect on things like COVID. For instance, if you have a look at the sort of heat maps, have a look at where the poor homes are and where you're getting big clusters of COVID, and also of those people then going on to have, you know, really serious problems with that particular condition. And so in our area, we've identified it as a crucial factor for us to deal with. So what have we done? We've got a plan, of course, we've got a plan. And in some areas in the city region, mainly on the Wirral over the water in Liverpool and a bit in Sefton, we have an over-concentration of older Victorian type terrace properties. And beautiful though those buildings often are, I know I live in one, they weren't originally designed with energy efficiency in mind. And in some areas, they are often occupied by people who can least afford to be wasting the energy that leaks through the windows, walls and roofs. And we've seen that staggeringly only about 1% of the 700,000 homes currently in our area that achieve EPC rating A or B, just 1% of those homes, with 75% of them rated D or lower. And so we need this retrofitting revolution. And then to enable us to do that, we've submitted plans to government to bring 6,500 homes up to EPC band C or above over the next 4 years as part of that COVID recovery stimulus package that we put to central government about 5 months ago. We're still waiting, by the way, to hear back from them. But that programme will be complemented by state-of-the-art modern methods of construction. So we're looking at what we need to do and how we can do things differently. And we're funded in our city region something called the Manufacturing Technology Centre. And there's one in Coventry. Some people will know of this. Really, you know, it's out there as being identified as, you know, way ahead in its thinking. But the next phase of their expansion is going to be in our area, and it will be about efficient methods for not just house creation, but for retrofitting. And the concept design is the support of some of the housing associations in our area, of people like the Peel Group, and it can be mainstreamed to retrofit even things like Victorian housing. And so phase 2 of the programme is a comprehensive approach to those methods of modular construction. Essentially, we're going to build homes like we build cars, and we're going to also retrofit homes like we would do on a production line with high spec, you know, the things that are well designed with cost savings because the reduction in waste, which is good for the environment, but also they will include a skills and delivery aspect to them so that we can include as many people locally in the development of this technology and hopefully, you know, steal a march on others. That's what I'm hoping for. But it's all focused on creating cleaner, greener homes fit for the next few decades and more. And it, again, it just caught what Andrew was talking about with spatial development and what Paul was saying. Really important to us as well. We've got the responsibility in the Liverpool City region for developing our spatial development strategy and how we use land in the decades to come. And it will be, again, about trying to use brownfield wherever possible, but also to look at place rather than just buildings. And we're going to publish our findings on this later in the year. So, Jade, just as a finish up, I want to thank you and the committee and everybody else who's involved in this, because it really is important now for us to get this right. And it is the time for the Healthy Homes Bill to come before us so that we can address some of the historic problems that we've got, but so that we don't repeat those mistakes of the past. And what you're trying to achieve has my full support.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Stephen. May I make just one personal remark on this? Your comment to Paul right at the beginning about Kirby is I actually worked in Halewood for 5 years in the 1970s, so I have an idea of what a overspill housing estate with no resources is like, and a single pub called the Leather Bottle.
I know it well, or I knew it well.
as I recall. So I do understand absolutely. And a lot of this is about place, isn't it? And about communities. And as I see somebody in the chat has referred to the idea of the 20-minute city, or as they're doing in Paris, the 15-minute city. I think we've got time just for one question to both of you, which is, it's somebody has asked us here about, this is also about the materials used in terms of how you do it. So not just in the retrofitting, but in the new build. And I think there's a more general point here I just wanted to ask both of you, if I can, which is the role of developers in this. You know, how we can get developers engaged in these quality issues as well as in the quantity and the volume issues. Now, I know we've got some developers on the call, but how do we get the private sector and the developers involved, as well as trying to persuade government to do things? I don't know which of you would like to attempt that first. Steve, you put your hand up first, so please.
Yeah, only because I've never found a problem with developers wanting to engage. So it's how we engage with them, isn't it? How we bring them on board, because at the end of the day, they will have a huge part to play in the type of housing mix and construction of buildings mix. And we want to make that as easy as possible and make that relationship actually work. So for instance, if we're saying that we want so many % of the housing in our area to be through modern methods of construction, we don't build houses. I used to, because I was a bricklayer by trade. And when you talk about materials, please, developers, keep on using bricks and mortars, lovely. You can do all the stuff inside it through modern methods of construction, but keep the brickies in employment, please. Because I never know when I'll need to go back to it. I've still got the trowel. But the sort of stuff that we're doing, for instance, on design, I've got the first design champion outside of London, who's a guy called Paul Monaghan, who's a RIBA winning architect. And it is then about trying to work together and using some of the soft powers that Paul was talking about as a metro mayor to pull together all of these things, because at the end of the day, because we have got spatial development powers, we will be able to enforce it, but it's much better if you can do it by the carrot rather than the stick. So that's our approach locally in our area.
Yeah, great. I see, just before turning to you, Paul, there's another chat come up from Flora S. Using local materials and services could be easily measured and a key to social value and identity. So over to you, Paul.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nigel. I think, you know, Steve's right. The development community do want to engage with us. They want to be an active part of realising really all of these strategies, be they local plans, city regional strategies, or, you know, things that the government may be pursuing in terms of, you know, beautiful homes, which seems to be a topic of conversation for government these days. But I do think, again, just back to a little bit of realism on this. Obviously, at the moment, we are in the middle of an industrial and regulatory crisis following, obviously, what's happened at Grenfell. You know, and at the moment we're still waiting for those new building regulations to become law, and that will have an impact on the agenda we're talking about today. And you know, it's shocking, really, to be quite honest with colleagues on the call, that in the UK, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, a country which is known for standards globally, that we find ourselves in this situation when it comes to the built environment and building regulations. So that's the realism. I guess for me, the real challenge is, how do we do everything we want to do and still deliver truly affordable homes? And that seems to be one of the biggest challenges, certainly for me here in the city of Salford and Greater Manchester, a post-industrial part of the country where, in addition to building homes, you're dealing with rising land values, you're dealing with the need to remediate land, you're dealing with the need to put in infrastructure, and all of this is being kind of left at the doorstep of the development community. And actually, you know, what we need to do is try and find a mechanism and a way where we can deliver on all what we've been talking about today, whilst also building homes that are genuinely, truly affordable, in line with what people actually earn. Because we are still in the middle of a homelessness and housing crisis. And I think for me, that is the real challenge here. How can we do quality homes that interface with the community and those environmental points that we've been talking about today, but also that we deliver that are truly affordable. And that is the challenge. And, you know, I don't think the solution is found solely in the development community. It's found in how we deal with land, as Steve has highlighted. It's found in terms of how the Green Book works. It's found in government public capital and how they actually invest into communities to deliver on this agenda. And that's really the space that I think we're in here in Greater Manchester. And obviously the forthcoming comprehensive spending review, we will be making a submission to that to try and deliver on many of our strategies and policies to deliver on what we've been talking about today. Thank you.
Great, thank you both very much for two very informative input from people who are grappling with these problems on a day-to-day basis and a very clear sense of reality around that. So thank you both very much indeed. Let us now turn to MPs, and I know we've got one or two MPs on the call. And let me go first of all to Barbara Keeley, MP, who I think would like to say something. Over to you, please, Barbara.
Thanks. And I want to reflect on health as well as housing, health and care. I think we've heard from earlier speakers that housing is an important area, you know, where the right policy, the right interventions can greatly benefit health and well-being. And I was reflecting, while there are a few of us MP colleagues on this call, how this during the pandemic, we've come to realise how many people are living in overcrowded and poor standard accommodation. And totally agree with Steve, the impact on COVID of that, you know, is enormous, really. And I've dealt with just too many cases recently of damp, mould and even rat infestations. I mean, it's diabolical that that's what I'm dealing with week in, week out. So poor housing can have a devastating impact on people's health, but it isn't just poor quality housing. It's the lack of appropriate housing, I think, that really can affect people's well-being. We know there are currently very large numbers of people living in care homes because their own homes weren't suitable for them once they developed care needs. And we know that that care home setting was itself dangerous to health during the pandemic after COVID infections were seeded into care homes. I think it's a good time at this point in the pandemic, as politicians in the Northwest, we should be asking whether it's the right way forward to have so much investment caring for people in care homes because their lifetime home couldn't be adapted to meet their needs. And at the same time, we too often have people trapped in hospital because there's no suitable accommodation for them in the community. Whether it's older people waiting for discharge after a hospital stay, or people with learning disabilities detained in hospital for years on end, it's got a devastating impact on their lives and well-being. The impact of poor or inappropriate housing on older people is substantial. Stair falls alone cost the NHS £70 million a year, and there are currently 700,000 homes across the country where residents are put at risk of excess cold. So what I want to just highlight briefly is it's possible to build high quality housing for older people and people with learning disabilities. In Greater Manchester, I want to give this as an example. The Fed are already doing this. They run Heathlands Village in Bury, which provides a range of accommodation for 160 people with care needs, with learning disabilities and with mental health needs. The statistics for Heathlands Village are amazing. They have got 30 supported living tenants as well as housing with care. The youngest person they have in supported living is 60. The oldest is 103, still living independently at 103. And they've got 54 residents over 90 and 5 over 100. I've been to visit, and it is such high quality housing, meeting the needs of older people to support not just their physical health, but their well-being. And it's a very impressive development. So I think we need to do more to promote developments like this for all older people, not just those who need care services, and for people with learning disabilities. And then just another fact, in this country, we have 2,000 autistic people and people with learning disabilities detained in hospital in totally inappropriate inpatient units, costing the NHS hundreds of millions of pounds. And it's almost entirely down to the fact that there isn't the housing or the care to support them in the community. So clearly we need local authorities to be funded so they can provide the services that older people rely on, but also that, as you've just been talking about, can work with developers to ensure that housing genuinely meets the need of people with older people and people with learning disabilities. It's great that we have an example like Heathlands Village in Greater Manchester to show what can be done, but we need many, many more examples like that to show how older people, people with disabilities can live independently, have their care needs and their housing needs met. Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you very much indeed, Barbara. Very powerful set of points about the impact of COVID and the relationship between health and housing. I 2 or 3 years ago did a review of mental health admissions to adult mental health admissions, and the biggest issue constraining discharge and the reason people were admitted was housing. There's a fundamental linkage here which we've got to be very clear about. But thank you for that. Let me now turn to Ian Byrne and move from Manchester to Liverpool. Ian, over to you. Ian, you're on mute, I think, at the moment. Great, I think you're with us now. Ian.
With you now, yeah. Most used phrase in the world at the moment. It's a real pleasure to be here and see you again, Nigel. And a real honour to be representing Liverpool City Region APPG. Already earning some fantastic contributions, and in Liverpool we certainly feel Paul's pain on cuts from central government. I'm surprised Steve never mentioned the infamous ski slope in Kirby, but I'm sure he'll be chuckling at that. I just want to touch on my great friend, Professor Ian Sinner. He's a leading paediatrician at Alder Hey Hospital, and he gives a presentation on the effects of poverty on the development of a child. And within the presentation, he names a number of issues which can detrimentally change a child's DNA by 10% in the womb. And these include a lack of food, air quality, and good housing. And that's what makes this event and this bill so important. Health and well-being should and must be hardwired into the recovery of this country from the pandemic. The Green Recovery Plan will be intrinsic to this recovery, and what an opportunity we have in the Northwest to do things differently and ensure our future generations have homes which actually enhance their development, not become an anchor. And I'm delighted to be working with the Tcpa, Dan Carden and Councillor Barry Kushner within Liverpool City Council to push the healthy home bills both nationally and locally. And as I said, we have a real opportunity in North West to be at the forefront of solving the housing crisis of quality as well as quantity. And we need to grasp it to build back a society in a far more equal and fair manner. So we clearly need legislative change. And I'd encourage all MPs who are on the call and watch the production of this to sign the EDM. My colleague Dan Carden has tabled, which calls for this and also has cross-party support. But what can we do now to drive the action on the ground and become the catalyst which was mentioned earlier? So as a starting point, councils can formally adopt the Healthy Homes Principle as a foundation for making policy on new housing. It won't give back the planning powers that the government wants to take away, and we're all terrified by the spectre of permitted development rights. But they are a clear signal of intent and a step in the right direction. So thanks, Nigel, for having the opportunity to say that.
Great, thank you, Ian. Really great to have you as part of this whole revolution, I suppose. I'm now going to turn to a colleague from the Lords, Lord Andrew Stummel. I noticed we've got two other MPs on the call, Afzal Khan and Tony Lloyd. And if you'd like to speak, if you could put your hands up, I will then bring you in after Andrew Stummel. So Andrew, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. And it's been very interesting to listen to the contributions which have come so far. Perhaps I should say that apart from once being a Northwest MP, I also have a background in the construction industry, which included working for 13 years in Runcorn Newtown for the Development Corporation. So you can pin some of it on me, although most of my work was building the main shopping centre. So we at least left you with some shops and pubs and other things in the centre of the town. First of all, I thought that Paul Dennett's analysis was very much correct, and indeed he saved me a bit of time, because I think he said many of the things that I might have said about the overall situation that we face, not just in Greater Manchester, but nationally, in terms of getting the various elements of planning and housing and investment policy lined up properly. And that's a real challenge. It's been a challenge to successive governments. The only thing probably where he and I are in disagreement is I don't think that the kind of comprehensive area-wide development plans which the coalition government stopped in 2010 were quite as beneficial as he thinks. The investment may be, but I think the direction of the programme was mistaken. So I hope we would do that again in a different way in the future. The other thing where I think it's important to understand is that for most of us and for most communities most of the time, the planning system is not really the limiting factor on whether you've got good or bad housing. And indeed, whether you've got any housing. And I sometimes do a little thought experiment. Let's suppose we didn't have any planning policy at all in this country and you could do what you like. Would you get 300,000 homes a year built? And the answer is no, you wouldn't. People wouldn't buy them, people wouldn't invest in them, etc., etc. And quite clearly, we need to have government investment if we want more homes, and particularly if we want more homes for people on low incomes. And completely relaxing the planning policy or top-down direction is a complete waste of time. And it does something worse, which is it alienates communities. And I see the current reforms as actually reversing some of the gains which have been made in community participation in the planning process as a result of the Localism Act. So I hope very much that we can push back against that collectively. Retrofitting is something which the government is evidently taking very seriously, but they don't seem to know what they're trying to do. And I very much welcome the intention, but I did say last year that I couldn't see any way at all that there was the capacity in the industry to develop it, nor could I see that there was any incentive for them to develop it, because it was a 6-month program, more or less, from September to March. And indeed, they've announced that £94 million has been spent out of £1,500 million, £1.5 billion. So 94 out of 1,500 has been spent on that program. And rather than moving that surplus expenditure, surplus budget into subsequent years, that's going to be reclaimed by the Treasury. So if you're a builder who maybe was thinking of taking on an apprentice to get some new skills for underfloor insulation or installation of heat pumps, what would be the point? Why should I put my business at risk investing in training and skills development if it's going to be a series of non-stop stop-start schemes? So if we want retrofitting, I'm absolutely sure that we've got to work on skills development. And I have argued at Greater Manchester level, as the other Andrew will know, that we should be trying to achieve in Greater Manchester what the rail industry has been doing for providing specialist skills, and set up our own academy for building and retrofitting in Greater Manchester, so that we've got a steady supply of people like Steve Rotheram who can lay bricks, but also do some of the more technically innovative stuff where, frankly, traditional tradespeople have got new skills to learn and can't simply walk on site and put in a heat pump. So I would say we've said a lot of, in fact, all the political parties most of the time can tell you exactly what the problems are, and they're not wrong. What has been quite difficult to achieve is a sensible amalgamation of those ideas into outcomes and policies which deliver. I'd like to think that my party, the Liberal Democrats, has done quite a good job on that, but I'm sure the other people speaking would have other views about that. But if we're going to tackle this, it's got to be taken out of the ideological football stadium, and we've got to do something cooperatively to deliver reforms of planning to some extent, investment and skills for another extent, tackling poverty, which is health and housing, as well as planning and environment, and biodiversity, which is surely coming up on the inside as one of the really big issues, which we haven't paid enough attention to in the past. So I don't think there's any shortage of things to agree on, but it may be quite difficult to find the clear consensus on how we're going to tackle it all.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I said at the beginning I thought we were going to be in violent agreement in part of this discussion, and that the key thing was how do we move on. I'm now going to move on by just asking Tony Lloyd to just speak briefly, and then I'm going to go back, if I may, to the two mayors, to Paul and Steve, just to ask you for a final quick comment before we move to the next panel. So first of all, could we have Ian Lloyd, I beg your pardon, Tony Lloyd.
Yes.
Thank you, Nigel. I don't mind being Ian Lloyd as well. Thanks. In fact, actually, this question of violence agreements is a real one. I'm going to violently agree with Andrew Stunn on I think virtually everything he said. I mean, the first thing I think is to say this, that what we've got to have is a recognition that we're dealing with the long term, and for the long term, we need some form of societal consensus around what the priorities are, and that means a cross-party view of what we're looking for. One of the things that I would want to just establish is that we can talk about houses, of course we can, housing numbers, and that's important, but actually a house is a home, and a home is normally a place within a community. And I think we've got to begin to rethink how we envisage our communities, and that is difficult because at the moment, we've got some 28 million homes, I think, in the UK. The bulk of those will still be around in a quarter of a century from now. We will build new homes, and we'll demolish some, but the bulk will be around. And that means we've got to look at this question of retrofitting, and we've got to look in particular about the enormous skills gap that exists in those skills and trades that are needed for that retrofitting process. If we're to convert existing homes into the environmentally acceptable buildings that we want, the low carbon homes that we want, the affordable to live in homes that we want. And I'm of the generation, I was a councillor and a member of parliament when I saw some of the dubious cowboy builders who came in during different government schemes under different governments, took money off people for doing work that, quite frankly, was an outrage and disgraceful. So we've got to insist that any programme like that conforms to the highest possible standards, both of competence but also probity, and that does mean giving the capacity, I think, to local government to be the monitor of the things that take place. And that actually, frankly, does cost, because unless we're prepared to put money back into building control, for example, back into the professional disciplines that will allow our local authorities to perform the roles that we want them to do, then we'll be missing a trick. I'll just make this as a final point, Nigel, because I know you're under some time pressure. The point I made at the beginning, homes aren't just homes for an individual family, they're part of a community. I think we have to look at how we see that whole community thing. Things like clean air, for example, matters in our communities, but actually as well, making sure that we've got affordable and reachable facilities, health, education, all the things that allow people to live normal lives. We've got to rethink localism in our society, and that's part of the Healthy Home Initiative. But thanks very much.
Thank you, Tony. Very much agree with that last point you make. I'm going to come to the two mayors for a brief comment, if you would, please, starting with Paul, and then I'm going to come to Afzal Khan, who I see has got his hand up. So, Paul, could you give us a closing remark from you? Before we turn to Steve, thank you.
No, thank you, Nigel. It's been great to hear the contributions from everyone, and I agree. I think we're all in violent agreement, and I think the frustration is, how do we, get on with the job in hand? It's about operationalizing our ambition, our vision, and government empowering rather than disempowering. And obviously, the white paper doesn't speak to empowering as far as I'm concerned. It speaks to further deregulation and further centralisation of powers in Westminster and Whitehall, which is only going to blight the agenda we're talking about here from an agency point of view, if we're serious about our ambitions and our visions. I think what we need to do is link this agenda urgently to our COVID-19 recovery plan, because we are facing a astronomical jobs crisis now off the back of COVID-19. So this green industrial revolution, if you like, around healthy homes and the relationship between housing and homes, I think offers us a great opportunity for jobs, reskilling and work in the 21st century. This is also good for industrial strategy for UK PLC, because if we get this right as a nation, we can end up exporting these skills, this experience and our expertise in this field around the world. So for me, it's about, yes, we've got the ambition, but what we need is a government to genuinely harness that, link it with levelling up and link it with the COVID-19 recovery plan. Thank you.
No, thank you very much indeed, Paul, for that and your earlier comments as well. That's terrific, really helpful. Steve, may we go to you now?
Thanks, Chair. Briefly, I think we need to get away from the silo mentality of departmental government, because we've just heard, haven't we, from different people, housing can't be compartmentalized because it links into everything else. So it has health implications, as Barbara was saying. It certainly has jobs and skills and apprenticeship opportunities, as Paul was just mentioning. Its environmental consequences could be huge, as Tony said. And then, you know, the whole thing contributes, doesn't it, to social cohesion, which is the sort of banter that myself and Andrew were entering into there. So if we continually just think of housing and just about housing, then we're missing the wider picture. And that's why a spatial approach to these things has to be the way forward. And any paper needs to consider that and certainly promote that as a way in which we won't get the things that we've got wrong previously, getting them wrong again.
Yeah, no, thank you, Steve. Really, really powerful points to sort of conclude your remarks on. So thank you very much for that. May I turn to Afzal Khan, MP, to come in at this point?
Thank you very much, Nigel. And I know we're coming towards the end of the session, so I'll be very brief. And I think I will start by thanking all the people who have given the presentation or the contribution. They've been excellent. And like a couple of other colleagues, there's hardly anything I disagree with. I think they've made it such a powerful statement. But for me, the COVID-19 actually has shone a light on this inequality, poverty, housing issues. Which always existed, but the light which has been shown now, I think what it means for us is ultimately to make sure that, you know, business can't be as usual. Like Paul Bennett was saying, really, we need to now link this up with the COVID-19 recovery. And that means really looking into the needs of the housing side as well. I mean, I was a councillor first time in 2000, and I remember at that stage, if somebody needed a house, I was able to more or less assist them with that. And within a couple of months, they would have a house. And here I am now, sort of 20 years down the road, I'm a member of parliament. I get so many case loads really linked to the housing issues, poor conditions or the need for housing, all those things. And there's hardly anything I can do. The waiting line time now, you know, I would say is anything between 5 to 8 years if they're lucky and if they're in the top bands. So it shows really how much pressure there is and how successive governments actually have been failing on this front. So again, that means that we really need to pile the pressure to make sure we tackle some of these challenges which are out there. But then if you couple this with the environmental challenges that we are facing, which also require that we take into account the modern designs and how these houses are, so that they take all that into account. Of course, we also have a huge progress in technology side of things as well. All those could be harnessed to ensure we have houses which are fixed. But of course, you see places like Manchester, where this, the stock and the housing actually have been reducing, where the pressure has been increasing, the city itself has been really growing. So ultimately, I think what we need is really ambitious plans with some pressure and urgency so that we can tackle these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those points. And can I thank, I think we've had wonderful to see all this political support for this. And I can say this from all parties as an independent member of the House of Lords and not a member of a political party. It's really great to see people making, this sort of recognizing the role that this has got and building the support for some of the change we've got to see happening. At this point, I'm now going to turn to chief executives of various organisations for the next panel discussion, starting slightly late. And we're going to start with a question, which is, what are the barriers to building homes and places which are healthy and improve well-being? We all know what we want to do. What are the barriers, and will the government's planning reforms help or hinder this, is what it's got written down here. I think we possibly know the answer to that. But let me start off with Piers Warburton, who's chief executive of One Powerhouse. Piers, please.
Thank you very much, Nigel, and it's a great pleasure to be with you today in such august company. Several people have mentioned about being in violent agreement. We're all in violent agreement, but I didn't realise that my own point was going to be made for me by several speakers, which is obviously very gratifying. Spatial planning is what the One Powerhouse, which I have the pleasure of leading, is promoting. Spatial planning, we have determined that the scale offered by spatial planning is key to the success. And we would look at the sort of 10 to 15 million population density as the right sort of region. So the regions of England have therefore been split up from our point of view to the north, the southeast, the Midlands, and the southwest. Spatial planning, nobody can disagree that housing is key to well-being and levelling up. It has direct links, as people have said before, to health issues, and it's obviously a tremendously important issue. The question is always implementation, which several speakers have talked about. Our view is that spatial planning should be the discipline used to address the levelling up agenda in its widest form. And we have actually gone ahead and created a spatial plan, or at least a draft spatial plan, for the 4 mega regions of England that can be seen on our website at onepowerhouseconsortium.co.uk. So we've done, if you like, the hard yards of showing the government what the discipline would look like when it's implemented here. And the government have some experience of spatial planning because they've used it for London and the home nations for their devolution settlements. So it is known, it just hasn't been used in England for various reasons. Our suggestion to government at the moment is that the National Infrastructure Commission, Sir John Armitt's organisation, takes our plans forward to take them up to scale, which would obviously require millions of pounds. We are a philanthropic organisation. We have enough money to do the spatial plans that we've done, but we don't have the bandwidth to take it further. The key element, and what's relevant for this conversation, is how do you get the spatial plans into people's lives? And our recommendation is what we call regional growth boards, but the government are now calling pan-regional partnerships. They amount to exactly the same thing. They would be made up of locally representative groups. That would be in the north, the MP11, the group of LEPs led by Roger Marsh, the local authorities through the Convention of the North, the APPGs that are relevant, and Transport for the North. They would come together, create their own entity. It would be non-statutory, we create their own entity. They would be responsible in turn to a minister or ministers. My suggestion would be the Chancellor, or ideally the Prime Minister. That will give something to the government that they don't have at the moment, and that is something to physically point towards for levelling up. And housing clearly is a very, very important part of that levelling up process because of its health implications and because of its relationship to the planning laws. The white paper on planning and the white paper on devolution have both been stalled, and the government, I know because I'm talking to the civil servants who are in charge of them, they don't really quite know exactly what to do, but they are looking at pan-regional partnerships. So this particular grouping is particularly valuable, I think, in looking at how that pan-regional partnership can come together. It'll be mayors as well. I forgot to mention the mayors. My apologies to the mayors of the combined authorities as well. So that's how we see the implementation process. And then, of course, it will be owned by the region itself. And we think that's very important. And that leads a pathway to fiscal devolution, which again is quite attractive for the government. So you have my full support. The One Powerhouse is 100% in support of healthy homes as part of the wider levelling up agenda. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Piers. That's very useful to know. Somebody just asked, are you counting northeast and northwest together as north?
Yes.
One word answer, the sort we like. Excellent, thank you very much.
Liverpool to Hull, up to Scotland.
Right, indeed, great. So let me then turn to Fiona Howie, who's Chief Executive of the Tcpa, and which is, of course, the originators of the Healthy Homes Bill. So Fiona, over to you. And just before you start, let me just say that there's lots of interesting dialogue going on in the chat. I'm going to probably have time for ask one question to the panelists after they've each had a chance to speak. So if anyone wants to get a question in, get it into the chat now, and we'll try and find one. Fiona, please.
Thank you, Nigel. I'm just conscious that some people listening today might be slightly less familiar with the Healthy Homes Bill, which I know lots of people have touched on. I won't go into great detail due to lack of time, but I just wanted to highlight that the concept is 11 high-level principles that we've developed in lots of consultation. We've talked to lots of people over about the last year and a bit, which when taken together would set the minimum standards for new homes to ensure that all new homes are of a decent quality. So the aim is to really prevent the development of really poor quality housing, and we very much see that as a social justice issue, because we know that is the only kind of home that some people are currently able to access, and we don't think people living in homes that are undermining their health and well-being and indeed their life chances as somebody linked, you know, to children's futures. We don't think that should be acceptable. I know Ashley touched on some of the principles. They relate to safety issues, risk of fire, preventing risk from fire, noise pollution's in there, air pollution's in there, but they also relate to many of the important points that have come up already around the wider environment. So there's reference to access to green and play space, walkable environments, access to sustainable transport. And I know, again, ageing population has been raised, and one of the principles does talk about new homes and their surroundings being designed to be inclusive, accessible and adaptable to suit the needs of all. So they're very high level, but they do try and touch on many of the points that people have raised today. As others have rightly highlighted, new homes aren't the only part of this jigsaw. Absolutely desperate need for affordable housing, spatial planning, absolutely important, retrofitting our existing housing stock, couldn't agree more. But I think what we're trying to do here is recognise that improving the quality of new homes is part of the solution. But absolutely, we know it's really complicated and we need to tackle many of those issues that others have raised. Will the planning white paper help? I think it's fair to say we, like others who've spoken today, have some concerns about the planning white paper. But what I would highlight in relation to this is that we need to harness the government's rhetoric about design, quality and beauty and really make the most of it at the moment. Whether or not a reform system will help or hinder, I think from our reading of what was put out in the white paper, which of course, as others have said, might well evolve in the future, we believe that trying to achieve high quality homes will heavily rely on the contents of proposed local design codes. And as people might be aware, the design codes that were referenced might be at neighbourhood level, street level, local authority level, or indeed site specific levels. So potential, but it could be very patchy. And that's one of our concerns, which is why we have been trying to campaign for this at the national level, to try and make sure there's that comprehensive application of the principles. However, as people will have gathered from today, we absolutely recognise the importance and potential of local action. And that's why it's fantastic to hear so much support from parliamentarians and local authorities. So I think my final point would be just to echo, I think it was Ian and others who have just said, it's fantastic we're all in violent agreement, but we now need to turn that into action. And of course, that's action at different levels. And I know there's different levers available to different people. So for local authorities and city regions, we really would urge the Northwest and indeed any local authority or city region that's not in the Northwest as well, but to formally adopt the Healthy Homes principles and show leadership on that issue. We see them as a foundation for a local approach to placemaking. They do relate to things like the 20-minute neighbourhoods ideas that people have mentioned. Permitted development rights, some, but we know not all do refer to design as a prior approval matter. So adopting these principles could be really powerful in trying to prevent some of the worst quality homes coming through both the formal planning system and PDR routes. We've developed a short briefing and a draft motion for local authorities. Obviously it's adaptable, but just to try and make people's lives easier, and maybe we can include the link in the chat, hopefully. in due course, as we mentioned, design codes might be incredibly powerful in a new system. So we will adapt our briefing in due course as we see where the government's going with that. I also want to echo, I know Ian very kindly raised the EDM about Healthy Homes Act. It's EDM 1417, I think I got that right. Which highlight the principles and just set out the support for that. So please, if you're a parliamentarian, please do consider supporting that. And if you're a member of the public, if you would like to support the 38 Degrees petition or indeed our campaign, please do consider doing that. So yeah, just fantastic to hear the conversation today. Just really urge people to let's try and take these forward into concrete actions.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Fiona. Now, I'm going to apologise in advance to both Edna Robinson and Jade Lewis that you've ended up at the tail of a long agenda, but we've still got time to get some great remarks in from you. So I'm going to turn to Edna first, chair of the Big Life Group and the People's Powerhouse, as opposed to one powerhouse from earlier. Edna, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Nigel, and great to be here. And yes, we are at the tail end, and no decision about me without me, I think, is the message that many sectors are trying to achieve in terms of organisations not having decisions that without the public in the room or people who have got a direct interest in the subject. Obviously the title's Housing and Health, and we've heard, as we've all said, some very intelligent analysis of what's happening. So I'm going to just try and add a bit of perspective to that. The health service is my background. I'm just currently looking into some of the health reforms, and interesting that nobody has mentioned the NHS reforms, which of course are going to be fundamental and symbolic in terms of understanding how we do create local infrastructures. And we're still in the middle of a pandemic, we're not through it, and we have got 2,000 less GPs than we had 5 years ago in the system. We will see a collapse of the morale of many of the NHS workforce at the end of this time. And so as we're building the health and well-being of our communities, how we draw in an NHS that is very vulnerable and fragile at the moment and undergoing major system reform is going to be a tricky challenge. People have argued continuously that the NHS can be quite difficult to engage. And so just to say that if we're talking about health and well-being in the context of housing, it's very important that we understand the impact of the resilience of the NHS currently. 70% of mental health services are actually provided by non-NHS providers, because that's actually where the capacity lies. And so local connectedness in terms of health and well-being is going to be really important. We're all agreeing about housing being a major social issue, but I would argue that it does have political connotations in relation to land and ownership of common land. There's also fundamentally been a commitment from government to reinforce that home ownership is a measure of success. And sadly, for many, then that is seen as a failure if they're not able to become homeowners. And clearly, you know, we would argue very strongly that a strong rented sector where learning from other parts of Europe is really important in terms of the dignity of people who don't own their own homes. So I think that there is a whole issue of driving people into debt through products that are on the market, and home ownership is something that we need to be really careful about. I'd also argue that, as we've seen, over 700,000 people now in debt through rent through the pandemic. There's a need for national mediation. There's a need for national mediation between those who are in debt and those who are asking for the money back. And so we can't leave this now to individual negotiation. We need to see some mediation, and I'd be interested to talk with some of the politicians today about how we do set up that national mediation. How do we ensure that organisations like Citizens Advice Bureaus and others don't go under as a result of this massive social need that is going to emerge?
Edna,
the other thing, having
shortly, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
I was going to say I'm going to have to ask you to finish off. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Having been a chair of the social landlord for the last 7 years, I'd just say that I think that there is a huge amount of energy in the social landlord community. We do occasionally behave competitively with each other though, so that's something that we need to address. And there's the whole issue of how we work, what our margins are, what are the margins that we're working at, what are the margins that private developers are working at, because we do need to get together to see that this is a major social and political issue.
Great, thank you. Sorry to rush you, Edna, but thank you so much for that. And really great you brought the NHS into the room. Well, you brought the NHS into the room, which is what I wanted to do, as you may imagine from my background.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Over to Jade. Jade Lewis, you're one of the architects, I think, of the of some of the work that's been done by the Healthy Homes and Buildings APPG, and writing the white paper, I think. So Jade, you're going to get the last word, except I'm going to take a minute at the end to say thank you to everyone. So Jade.
Thanks, Nigel. Yes, it's one of the co-authors along with a few of the other sponsors of the group. I'm conscious I've only got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to focus on the recommendations set out in the white paper and how the recommendations could help in the delivery of poor quality homes in the North West. So firstly, improve governance. We've heard a bit about that today. We need a single responsible government department.
Jade, I think we're actually losing you after this. You seem to be on mute. Do you want to try again? We've got some unfortunate feedback on the line, I think. Try again, Jade, if you can.
Right, is that any better?
Not much. You're coming out slightly crackling, but do you want to just try? I mean, I don't know if you've got something that's producing feedback somewhere. Try again. Try, just speak again.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm very sorry about this. Trust this to go at the last minute. Okay. So we need improved governance. That's come up a number of times today. A single responsible government department and a cross-departmental committee for healthy homes and buildings, which could ensure that policy-making decisions are joined up and public health and well-being is actually placed at the heart of decision-making. The government would then not only be targeting 300,000 new homes per year, but aiming to build 300,000 healthy new homes, which were designed to improve the quality of life for the occupants by taking a holistic approach to building design. This would ensure all homes built in the Northwest were energy efficient, thermally comfortable, full of natural light, have good air quality, were spacious, safe, and unwanted noise was minimised. Government funding will be available to research what makes a healthy home, and evidence will be gathered via a database of building health, and national optimum building standards would be regularly updated based on the findings. Public awareness would be raised, creating demand for healthy homes, and the industry would be upskilled to be able to design, build and renovate healthier indoor environments. The retrofit of current housing stock would be a priority, and homes would be improved via a national renovation strategy to overcome issues damaging to health. A new local authority league table of housing standards and health standards for the private rented sector would also help drive improvements to existing buildings. Improved tools like a building's passport would be available to help determine the measures required and drive improvements in in-use energy performance. Taxation would be used to incentivise the public to make their own home improvements. And finally, effective enforcement and increased numbers of environmental officers would all ensure that this happens. Right. All of this could deliver low cost of the NHS, improved educational attainment and workplace productivity, reduced carbon emissions, lower energy bills, improved health and well-being and greater quality of life. And of course, the local authorities in the Northwest don't need to wait for the UK government. They can implement many of these recommendations now, meaning they would reap the benefits for healthier homes and immediately help to improve lives across the Northwest. Very sorry about the technical issues there.
Great, no, thanks, Jade, and I'm sorry to rush you at the end there. I've got my minute to do two things. One is to say thank you to people. Thank you to Emily Carter and Jill Morris, who've been behind this and have been behind the scenes and and trying to keep me in order and keep the whole event in order, which is great. And we've still got 81 participants, which is tremendous for an event like this, and a wide range of people engaged, which again I think is absolutely tremendous. So we should be, I think, well placed to start to see some change happening. There's a lot of good stuff in the chat, as people have seen, and references to the documents that are referred to that you can pick up there if you haven't seen them. This is only the start of the process, of course. We're all going to be pushing this revolution further forward. I hope that either I in the Lords or an MP in the Commons will be able to introduce this bill after the next Queen's speech, whenever that is. But in the meantime, we're going to be pushing the principles wherever we can around that. And then the final remark I just made is this all reminds me of an expression I use a lot, and a great African saying, which is health is made at home, hospitals are for repairs. And indeed, health is made at home and in the community and in the workplace and in the school. And that's, I think, what our mayors have been talking about, isn't it? And all of us, about the sort of totality of bringing those things together. And we need to think about health and well-being in those terms, as well as the fantastic repair system and beyond that the NHS provides. So on that note, thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you everyone who's participated, whether in the chat or by speaking, or just by listening and taking it all in. Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.
Thank you, Nigel, as well.